Welcome to Follow to Lead, where we discover how to listen for and follow God's call so that we might lead others to God. Our shared stories of inspiration from religious leaders and those active in the educational ministry of the church can help you know better how God is calling you and the role passionate Catholic education plays in spreading His message of faith, hope, and love. Now please welcome the hosts of Follow to Lead, Father Randy Sly and Kyle Pietrantonio.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Christ the teacher, teach us to listen. Teach us to do the deep listening to the sounds of our soul, waiting to hear your voice calling us to cast out deeper, to become fishers of men and women, shepherds of souls, to follow your will in order to lead others to the truth, beauty, and goodness only you can offer. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Welcome to Follow to Lead, a journey twice a month into the world of Catholic education, exploring what it means to follow God in order to lead others to Him. I'm Father Randy Sly, your host, and today we will be talking with Brett Salkeld, the founder of Making Every Class Catholic, a ministry for Catholic educators. He is also the Archdiocesan theologian for the Archdiocese of Regina in Saskatchewan, Canada. Brett is also responsible there for deacon formation. He's the author of Can Catholics and Evangelicals Agree About Purgatory and the Last Judgment? How Far Can We Go? A Catholic Guide to Sex and Dating with Leah Perot, and Transubstantiation, Theology, History, and Christian Unity. Of course, one of his recent works is the one that kind of has exploded for him, and it's Educating for Eternity, a teacher's companion for making every class Catholic. And Brett is sought after as a speaker on many topics related to the Christian and Catholic faith. He also serves the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops as a member of the Roman Catholic Evangelical Dialogue in Canada. His weekly podcast with Deacon Eric Drash is called Thinking Faith. He earned his PhD in systematic theology from Regis College at the Toronto School of Theology and has a bachelor's degree in education from the University of Regina, where he studied to become a social studies and math teacher. He worked with graduate and undergraduate education students and with Catholic teachers in various professional development settings. He lives in Regina, Saskatchewan with his wife Flannery and their 7 children. And Brett has been a guest on Follow to Lead a couple of times and is a keynote speaker, was keynote at the last summit this last fall in Houston. And we really consider him a part of our Duke and Altum School family. We don't have a faculty, we have a family. So, Brett, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be back, Father. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, too. And, as we begin our discussion today, I'd like to encourage our visitors to view or listen to your previous visits with us on Follow to Lead. The first one was episode 63, and that was on August 18th, 2023. Hard to believe. We've gone back that far. And then also episode 75 on February 23rd of this past year. And that will give you some context for a lot of things that we'll be talking about today. So, Brett, for any new members of the audience, would you give us just a little bit of background on your life and your upbringing?
Yeah. So I grew up in small town Saskatchewan, St. Wenceslas Parish. Cradle Catholic, went away to university in Regina, met my wife here, was going to be a high school teacher, but discovered theology somewhere along the way and went off to grad school in theology in Toronto. Married Flannery and started our family out in Toronto. Did my master's and my doctorate in systematic theology. A couple of the books you mentioned there are products of that. The Purgatory book was my master's thesis. The Transubstantiation book was my doctoral dissertation. but kept working with Catholic teachers. I finished my ed degree, and as soon as I was doing my doctorate, I was doing professional development work with Catholic teachers out in Toronto, and have kept up that work ever since. And then back here, came home to Regina, got a job as archdiocesan theologian in my home diocese, so I can raise my kids near their grandparents and some cousins. And it was out of my work here with future Catholic teachers in the university, and then working Catholic teachers in our local Catholic school system, that this idea for this book, Educating for Eternity, emerged. What we call in Saskatchewan curriculum permeation, the idea that you teach in a Catholic school, every subject should be taught from a Catholic point of view. So what does it mean, both in theoretical and in practical terms, to think about teaching math or health or social studies from a Catholic point of view? So the book grew out of that. And as you indicated, Father, the reception has been very warm, maybe even overwhelming at times. But it seemed that it was something that a lot of people in Catholic education were thinking about doing, were trying to do, were looking for resources to do. And the book really seemed to land in a place where a lot of people were looking to do work. So I've been very blessed to be able to support people in that kind of thing, and to meet people like you and so many others through Duke and Altum and other places. So,
it was fascinating to me to see the explosion, really almost, that took place from back in our first conversation a year ago last August. And that book was just brand new. In fact, I started telling everybody about it in the different schools around here because of the fact that it did deal both with some of the philosophical and strategic areas, but it also dealt with practical content suggestions, which was a marvelous blending of the two. And, the book really did, I think it fit a niche. It was an answer to a pain, it seemed to me, in Catholic education. And it's opened up a lot of opportunities for you to travel. I know you've been in schools and dioceses across North America and beyond. In your travels, how would you describe the current culture in Catholic education?
That's interesting. So most of my travel has been in the United States. Canada and the United States have some important differences, particularly in Canada, where there's provinces that have publicly funded Catholic schools, like we have here in Saskatchewan, where I am, in Alberta, where I've done some work, Manitoba and British Columbia, where I've done some work. They're partially funded. So that introduces some differences. But particularly in the United States, at least the places that are bringing me in, seem to be in some transitional kind of phase. So there's a sense that sort of the old is dying and something new is replacing it. And, different places are at different stages in that kind of development. But I think one of the reasons the book landed so cleanly for some people is the sense that we need to be able to articulate what makes an education intentionally Catholic. Not, we're nicer here or something, something vague like that, but something that is really sort of robust and that you can put your finger on. And in a lot of places, there's a decline in Catholic schools, decline in enrollment, closing schools. Now, sometimes there's demographic issues related to that. It's not all ideological or cultural, but in many of those places, new schools are blossoming. Families that are looking for something intentionally Catholic. Sometimes those are new schools that are founded by groups of parents. Sometimes that is a renewal that's taking place at a diocesan level. Sometimes it's an old school that itself sort of transitions. There's a whole bunch of different ways it's happening. But I'm finding everywhere I go, and now, of course, my sample set is biased because people who are bringing me in are going to be people who are interested in this kind of renewal. But the simple fact that there's so much interest in what I'm trying to do indicates that it's pretty widespread. Groups like Duke and Altum or the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education, I've been to their conferences, and each of them, I think in the last year, had their largest conferences ever, and are looking, the problem with next year's conference planning is like finding a venue that will hold everyone. So these groups that are in the sort of vanguard of this renewal are booming. Yeah, so there's really even if the overall numbers, even if more schools are closing than opening, I think that's a little bit deceptive because that's the things that are closing are maybe that's the result of a long process of decline in a lot of cases. Whereas the growth is much more sort of rapid and you know there's significant promise for the future. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what things look like in 10 years, but it does feel like a real transition time.
And from your travels, you see then that there's a shift, an intentional shift in terms of how Catholic education is approached, at least in the areas where you're visiting.
Absolutely. Yes. And I would say it's happening at several levels. So people are bringing me in to talk to, working teachers by and large. But other places where renewal is happening is in like teacher training. So there are universities now that are rethinking how they do teacher training. And my book is one of many books that they're using in their sort of updated curriculum for training teachers. And so it has to happen at all these levels. It has to happen with working teachers. It has to happen with future teachers who are training. But it is. And there's lots of partners doing different pieces of this. There's work that needs to be done in HR. There's work that needs to be done in professional development. There's work that needs to be done in teacher training. There's work that needs to be done in curriculum development. Like there's just, there's so much that's connected to this. And I'm only one small piece of it. But I know good people who are working in all of those different facets of the question, and it's really exciting to watch it grow.
One of the things that intrigues me and I think is a key component in all this is hiring for mission.
Right.
That a lot of what needs to take place perhaps is kind of a turnover of some individuals who now will come in with a different level of commitment to intentional Catholic education. Are there ways that your book is influencing that particular area of school life?
I've had some interesting conversations around that. So one of the things I would say is everyone I talk to who's hiring, I mean, there's just not enough teachers. Everyone is struggling to find good people. But one of the key elements is like it's going to take a while. It's a long game to get a lot of people trained in this way of thinking, and you're going to be hiring people out of state schools or even Catholic universities that have not yet sort of updated their approach. And the question for hiring there is often not do you have all of these pieces in order yet, but are you open to being coached or trained or integrated into this kind of a system? And so we had it was in the Q&A session of my talk at Duke and Altum in Houston. This came up where people who do hiring were talking about different ways they handle this in interviews. The kinds of questions they ask and what kind of questions would indicate a kind of openness and a willingness to explore in this kind of way. And which would indicate that maybe this person isn't a good fit for the mission, like my book, whether it's part of what someone studies in their undergrad that might prepare them to work in Catholic schools, or if it's something that you use in the first or second year teacher training, that's another place where I've heard it being used, right? So, I was just on the phone on a Zoom call this morning with Madison, Wisconsin, and they have a second year teacher training, and they're using my book in that context. And so, when teachers are young and they're brought in and you can sense, they want to be part of the mission. Maybe they have some formation from their undergraduate that will help there. Maybe they don't, but there's an openness. Well, then we can work with them. And my book, among many other works, of course, mine's just a small piece of the puzzle, but it's an important part that various dioceses or schools are using onboarding new teachers and that kind of thing.
So when you have these discussions, and I'm sure there's some lively Q&A that goes on regarding how to be formed in these various areas, have you found some new ahas that would perhaps be included in making every class Catholic version 2?
Oh goodness. Yeah. Well, yeah, I've learned so much on the road because I mean, I'm just a theologian. Like I like thinking about things theoretically. I'm a big picture, how does math fit in with life and human flourishing? But I'm not the person who has ever sort of coached or managed teachers through a process of integrating a new way of doing something, right? So working with people who've done that, I basically poach. I poach from people, and then I share that with the next people I work with. So one really very specific one that comes to mind is a very common story here is a diocese or someone will sort of mandate, we're going to have Catholicism throughout the curriculum. It's a box that you check on your lesson plan. But most people don't have any training in how to do it. So they kind of wing it or they try it once or twice and it doesn't feel like a good fit and they go back to doing what they've always done. And then one day the principal sort of does a cold call and shows up at the door of the classroom. And then they sort of awkwardly try to, make it fit without preparation or whatever. And like, this is always a disaster. And I was working with a group of administrators, and this is just a great insight for me that I've used ever since. They said, don't cold call your teachers and expect them to be doing something you haven't trained them to do. Um, Sit down and make a plan with them. Here's a lesson plan I want to try. And brainstorm it and workshop it, and then let them invite you. Let them come to you and say, look, next Wednesday, I'm teaching that lesson that we worked on together. Can you come in and observe? Then you give everyone a chance to succeed. And then you do what you do. Like, this is not where I'm the expert by any stretch, right? You sit in, you observe, you debrief, you share, you think about what went well, what could have gone better. Maybe you share your learning in a staff meeting context or something like that. And then you try again, taking your learning into account for the next round, right? So, all those kinds of very practical things are not in my book. But I've learned from people who know how to do this, who are professionals who do this every day in their day job, some of those kinds of things that help me help other people put this morning on the call with Madison, they said, we don't want you to come in and be a flash in the pan one day, PD day. Maybe a few people get excited, but a week after you're gone, we're back to where we were. We want a plan for integrating this. And so I was able to say, because of so many conversations I've had with people and different experiences I've had, look, let's start with, we've got plenty of lead time. This is next September. Let's start in January. You shoulder tap 20 or 30 key leaders. They can read the book together. They can meet with me online for Zoom meetings and do Q&A and integrate the material. They can be your small group leaders on the day when I show up. They can be the people who are responsible for follow-up with their staff after the fact, because I've given them a bit of training. So I'm not just coming in out of nowhere on the PD day, but I've built a relationship with a group of leaders who are going to be responsible for implementation after I'm gone. And that kind of thing is just makes you get so much more bang for your buck if you're going to, fly somebody in from Canada. You want to make sure that there's impact after he's gone, kind of thing. And so I've learned all those things on the fly. And none of them are, in the book, but there could certainly be some, whether it's in a second book or some other format, there could be some form of practical guidance, even if it's just options that I develop on my website. So you can look and say, well, that's how we'd like to do it, or whatever,
Well, it sounds like you may even have a new template for how to go in and do professional development to have this early on formation done before you even get there, which sounds like a great way to build an infrastructure to do the implementation after you're there for that day. So
right.
That's pretty neat.
I've done workshops with groups who have read the book before I got there and with groups who haven't. Of course, the vast majority are groups that haven't. The workshops work fine when people haven't read the book. But the workshops with people who have read the book are like explosive.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first bit of the workshop with people who haven't read the book is there might be a little deer in the headlights. And then they figure it out pretty quick. I see the changes happening in real time. But the people who've read the book and have thought about it, man, they're ready to go. And one really practical thing I say is, like, it's easy to buy a book. It's hard to get people to read it.
Yeah.
Most people don't need to read the whole book, actually. Your math teacher can read part one and the math chapter. And if they're a keener and they want to read the rest, God bless them. But in order to get buy-in from your staff, like you're going to get some credibility by saying to them, hey, we want you to read part one, which is only like a third of the book. It's 70 or 80 pages. And then we want you to pick one or two chapters from part two and be ready to think and talk about those. It's a lighter lift for you as an administrator who's trying to get buy-in.
Yeah.
Because it's a lighter lift for the teacher. It seems like it respects the fact that they're busy and that they, and I would love it if everyone read my whole book cover to cover. But from a very practical point of view, you can have a staff meeting where the people who read the phys ed and health chapters can talk for 10 minutes about that. And the next week, the people who read the math and science chapters can talk for 10 minutes about that. Because we're a team, as a staff, you're a team. You're not all experts in everything. So we don't need to, force everyone to read everything. If they want to, carry on. I mean, read the book, enjoy it. But
now, one of the natural outworkings, I think, of what you've done as you've traveled to different places is your new online community, the Making Every Class Catholic online community. Let's talk about that for a second. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I'm working my tail off to try to get that launched. We're recording here on December 10th, and I've got an event tonight with a fellow from your neck of the woods, Dr. Andrew Salzman from Benedictine.
Oh, yes.
In Kansas. He's going to do a presentation for us tonight. The impetus for this was, it's related to what we just talked about. I didn't want to fly in, do a talk, leave, and sort of wish you the best. I wanted to be able to support partners after I was gone. And for the first little while, when I had a small number of partners, I would do follow-up Zoom meetings and whatever, and I didn't charge for that. People had already paid me for a professional development day, and I considered it sort of all-inclusive, and that was fine. But as you have more and more partners in your ambit, doing sort of long-term consulting for free with all of them is a full-time job with no compensation, which is... I realized that was not going to be a sustainable model for me. But I also realized that I was duplicating my work because what I was doing with one group was not that different from what I was doing in another group, and that everyone could learn from each other. And an online community offered me to kill both those birds with the same stone. If people who've worked with me want to continue working with me after I've flown home, they can do it through an online community where if I do a question and answer with their staff or with the people who are responsible for revamping their science curriculum or whatever the group is that I might be working with, well, we can make a recording of that and it can become part of a online library of resources that we house inside the community. And people, it's happening right now. It happened this morning. There's a superintendent from Charlotte, who's asking for people who've done work in science curriculum revamp, and a few different people said, well, we did this in our diocese or we did this at our high school, and I can put you in touch with that person, and this is their area of expertise. And so it's allowing a bunch of people to support each other, including people who have expertise that I don't have. So the community is not just where you have access to me and what I'm able to offer, which is, I hope, something valuable, but it's also a place for networking with other people who are doing the work you do on the ground every day, where I don't necessarily have the expertise, but I can connect you with good people because in my travels, I've met so many. So it's both a place where I can continue to support people and where people can encounter each other and build up a network of Catholic educators who are all trying to do this.
This is really, I think, a wonderful extension of your personal ministry to them. And I had a chance to look around the site, and I'm a proud member.
Welcome.
Making Every Class Catholic online community. And it was really neat looking at the membership. I mean, it's everything from diocesan superintendents to educators, teachers in the field, everybody from all kinds of different parts of the education sphere. And it's an easy place to go. It navigates a lot like, say, LinkedIn or Facebook. So it's a familiar arena, I guess you could put it,
right.
for people to community.
The interface is pretty intuitive. The platform is called Circle, and
Yeah.
the interface is pretty intuitive. I'm just learning to use it myself, and a lot of the stuff is pretty new, and the resources and the library and the things are going to grow. But yeah, it's not hard to navigate, and there's lots of different places where you can have conversations, where I'm providing content. Lots of stuff going on. Yeah.
One of the things that's really neat is that when you could put a post on and it will go into the home, which is the feed, and it will
Right.
kind of integrate into that. But you also have the ability with your post to put it in a different, they're called spaces.
Right.
So you can actually take your post and put it in a specific space. Like if you want to look at discussions, there's a space for that. If you want to look at events, there's a space for that. So
Right.
you can basically find a niche for what it is that you want to do with the post that you're putting up.
Right. And this allows it to be much more searchable after. So you know how the feed is. Well, the feed is just going to get, practically infinitely long within
Right.
some period of time. And you're not going to want to go scrolling to find the thing. It's going to show up in the feed when it's new, but once it's sort of too old to find easily by scrolling the feed, well, if it's a resource, if it's a discussion, if it's an event, if it's what I call content pillars, and we'll probably talk about that in a second, where you just click on that space and everything is sortable, and you can put keywords that it can be sortable by. So it should, over the long term, build a pretty substantial library of different things that you can then go in and grab when you need. It becomes very navigable, very sortable, very searchable.
So tell me about the content aspect.
Yeah, so I've developed what I call 4 content pillars. They each happen monthly, so that's roughly one per week. The first one is we launched a podcast that is housed in the community. So the Making Every Class Catholic podcast, episode 1 is on YouTube right now with Dr. Chris Baglow from the McGrath Center at Notre Dame, and an important voice on these questions. I just did an interview with Archbishop Michael Miller of Vancouver, who wrote the little book, The Holy See's Teaching on Catholic Schools. So the podcast is going to come out monthly. I mentioned Dr. Salzman from Kansas. So the second content pillar, right now I'm calling it the Community Showcase, which basically means someone who's not me but a member of the community is making a presentation. So I think it's important to cultivate other voices within that community and bring in expertise from lots of people. And I've got some great folks lined up for that kind of work. Another is they call them masterminds. The
Yes.
masterminds we're going to do here, again, once monthly, are going to be based on the workshops that I do with teachers. When I come do a keynote address in a diocese or a school, well, the next thing we do after that is a workshop where we start to apply things practically to something we might actually teach in our classroom. And so we're going to take that process and we're going to turn it into an online process with the monthly mastermind. So if you've got a unit you got to teach on reptiles, you can bring it to the mastermind and we'll go through a process that will get you some insight into how you can think and teach about reptiles from a Catholic point of view in a Catholic school. And the fourth pillar is a little more open-ended. It's a Q&A. Now, maybe at some point, the community is large enough to sustain just a sort of open Q&A once a month. My gut tells me that early on, at least, we're going to have to designate a little bit. So, for example, I'm doing Q&As with other partners already. I did a Q&A with a group of students from the Franciscan University of Steubenville who were reading my book in their class. And that will be the Q&A for December. It won't be live in December because nobody wants to come to a live event on December 24th. So we're in
Right.
December, we're instead of having a live one, we're going to have a recorded one. But in the future, I have a few Q&As lined up. There's a group of consultants in a diocese who are working on revamping a science curriculum. Well, they're going to do a Q&A with me. We'll make it available live to the rest of the community. Whoever wants to join, we'll record it. Once it's done, it becomes part of the library of resources. So the Q&A sometimes will be sort of bespoke. If you and your community are working on something and you think I can help you, well, let's do that. And then it becomes a resource for everybody. And I think eventually, probably once we have enough members for it to be sort of feasible, a live Q&A with me that's sort of open-ended. Now, maybe 1 month we say, well, we're talking about world languages, so bring your questions about world languages, or we're talking about elementary, or we're talking about, we can pick a theme. But anyways, that's the fourth one is Q&A. So every month, one of those is going to come out. The podcast will have a segment that's available to the general population. On YouTube, you can watch it right now, even if you're not a member. The other three are going to be in-house. And the podcast itself has an extended version that is for members. And I'm really excited about this feature. The members can submit their questions within the community for the future guests. So Dr. Baglow, Archbishop Miller, they took guests from the community, and we recorded a sort of appendix to the podcast that is the extended version is available to the community members.
Wow, you have got a lot going on already in a very early onset of this community, and it really is very robust. I just was amazed at all of the different resources that are there. And what do you see in addition to this? Where would you like to see this go in the future?
Oh, well, I mean, I would love it for it to be the place where Catholic educators who want to think seriously about making every class Catholic come to get resources, to share best practices, to bounce ideas off each other, to be the thing that I can, when someone says, it was great that you came here to speak, but what's next? For it to be a sort of place of continued contact and work together. I'm also working on some e-courses. And so e-courses, some will be available in certain formats outside of the community, but the format that you would do if you wanted to do it as a staff, let's say you're a school, 50 staff, you want to do an e-course, there's 4 or 5 minute videos and then some discussion questions, and there's about 20 of those. Well, maybe over the course of a year, you do one video per staff meeting. You spend 10 or 12 minutes at the beginning of a staff meeting watching a video, having a little conversation. That version is going to be available within the community, offered on the Circle platform. And so all of these things, I hope, build up a kind of synergy, right? That the e-course brings people into the community, that the community is a place where you can access the e-course along with a whole bunch of other resources. I'm glad to hear you say you were impressed with how many resources we have already. We're only a couple weeks old. Anything like this, you have a chicken and egg problem, right? You need community members to build up your resources, and you need time, but then you need resources and to attract community members. So it was really important for me to put in as much effort as I could beforehand to have something robust by the time you land, because you want something happening sort of from day one, but it's pushing a snowball down a hill is what I hope. Right now I'm pushing pretty hard to get that snowball moving. What I hope happens is as the community starts to grow and people get used to interacting with each other, that a lot of these things become more organic and require less of a big push from me. And we're all going to learn how to do that together. I mean, it is a little bit of an experiment, but so far it seems I'm delighted that your initial experience of it has been so good. That's great feedback for me.
Well, one of the things I think that is going to be helpful, and I've already noticed it happening, is if you have a couple of key members who already begin to initiate conversation, to initiate discussion, to list events, to do those things. And you've got some key people that are doing just that right now. And so when you go there, even, in this early stage, you find things happening. And I think that's the beautiful part of it. It isn't just you presenting something, but it's the membership actually contributing already to kind of that inertia, that momentum to keep things moving forward.
That's I did a lot of research before I launched this. I had to do maybe a second degree is a bit strong, but I had to do several coursework worth of research. And one of the things I found was if the community becomes a cult of personality, it will die.
Yeah.
That's a terrible model. It's tempting if people like you and they say, "Hey, your book is great," or whatever it is, and you're sort of the initial draw. It's tempting, but it is not a healthy community. And what you need is a community where the members themselves are contributing and interacting, not where everyone's just coming to hear what the guru says. And so you have to be very intentional about lifting up the other voices and empowering people to do what they can do. I say, if I get hit by a bus in 2 years, the thing should run without me. That should be my goal. I'm not planning on getting hit by a bus, and I want to keep contributing, but without me, the thing should work. Now, that's not going to happen overnight, but that needs to be the long-term goal.
Well, I noticed that almost immediately because you just list yourself as one of the members.
Okay.
Yeah, which to me, that is great. When I open the site, you have a new logo for making every class Catholic. It really is about that. It is not about you. It's not even about the book. It's about this idea, this goal that we have of permeation, where the content of a class is just saturated with good Catholic stuff.
Right.
And that's what I love about it, is that I think people can get there. I was looking at it today and I thought, I was going to post a couple of things. I don't have time. I got to get ready for our podcast here. But the people that are already contributing make you want to contribute. They're at a level of hunger. They have something to offer. The best way I describe a community like this, it's every beggar telling other beggars where you're finding your bread.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm just delighted that your initial encounter with it was so positive, because I can, when I think about it now, I can see it, but I've watched it grow from like the very first post that someone who wasn't me made. You know what I mean? And that was a big day for me. I told my wife, like, someone who wasn't me made a post in the community. But of course, over time, that does start to build and to generate engagement. And so please, once we get off of here, do go in and make a few posts, because that's what we need. We need the participants to take on those leadership roles for it to really be what it can be.
Oh, absolutely. And are there other things that you see other than the online community? The e-courses, I think, are going to be critical. Any other thoughts on where this might be leading?
Oh, it's running too fast for me in some ways. I have a lot of things I want to do, and finding time to do all of them is the challenge. I've had some other writing that's been inspired by the work I've been doing. So a few things on that front, that pray for me that I find the time to do this. The book, as you know, has subject-specific chapters on 8 subjects. You had to draw the line somewhere if you ever wanted to finish the book. But I've had great encounters with world languages teachers, music teachers, computer science teachers, psychology teachers, business teachers. And there's no chapter in the book for any of them. And I want to write those chapters. I have places where I can publish them online. Church Life Journal, I do a lot of work with. They're interested in hosting things like that. I actually drafted the beginning of a children's book that could be a resource in a Catholic school library for, grade 4 science and religion. And it grew out of a conversation I had with a family at church one day after Mass. That who knows, could be a whole series. I call it in my head, I call it the Curious Catholic Kids series. Who knows what it'll become. I want to work with other educators to produce a book of sort of sample lesson plans. So I've heard so many cool ideas for lesson or unit plans. But I'm not a working teacher. I'm not a lesson plan expert. I want to get people who actually are experts, people who've actually taught this lesson in their classrooms, to put together something that would give a broad set of examples from K to 12 and from a whole range of different subject areas. A few different ideas that have come up that I never dreamt of before I wrote the book, but they come up all the time in my workshops. One is one we call pilot units. So a big question in math is like, well, it's hard to find content, Catholic content in math class. And if you can make it artificial, it feels awkward and forced. So what instead we've thought of is maybe for the first couple days in a math class, we zoom out and ask big picture questions about what math is, what it means to live in a universe where math works, how does math relate to the human vocation, right? Big picture questions about math. And then, 2 weeks later, you're just doing quadratics and you're pursuing God's truth and beauty through quadratic equations. And you don't need a Bible verse to tack onto that necessarily.
Right.
So pilot units is one, cross-curricular units is one. I just had an idea the other day. A lot of people believe that medieval Europeans thought the earth was flat. Now that's a piece of anti-Catholic propaganda, actually. So there's a history component of that. What did medieval people think, and where did this piece of Catholic propaganda come from? But you can actually do a math lesson on how the ancient Greeks calculated the circumference of the earth using shadows at the equator, right? So you could do math and calculate the circumference of the earth, and then you could learn history, and then you would learn something about what your religious forebears did and didn't think about the shape of the earth and how that related to how they read the Bible. That could be a really neat cross-curricular unit. Those are just two examples, but there are dozens. So I'd like to have those available. I hope people in the community start sharing lesson plans in the community. In fact, I had the idea the other day. If maybe you want to submit a lesson plan to the community, and you can get 1 month free off your membership.
Wow. Yeah.
And that way we can build that resource library and get engaged members at the same time, right? So, a few ideas.
One of the things I didn't see, and I wondered if you were going to add it in the future, is the idea of sub-communities. For example, a space for world languages, a space for science teachers, and they could build their own little community and talk amongst themselves about some of these things.
Absolutely. That's been part of the plan from the beginning, and we basically need to get to a place where there's enough people in each group for that to be feasible.
Sure.
Right now, I would say the single largest group is probably administrators.
That's what I was seeing, yeah.
And I've always imagined that one of the sub-communities would be for administrators. But subject area specialists would be another kind of sub-community. I think the really littles, like the pre-K to 2, that's its own game in a way.
Yeah.
I think a sub-community for those people would be important. If we end up with some significant number of people who aren't maybe working directly in the schools, but maybe chaplains. Some chaplains work directly in the schools, but others are, maybe a parish priest who's not in the school all that often, or whatever, right? But different people who have certain coaches, parents. If there's some subset of the community that's parents, maybe they could have a sub-community. So yes, by all means, and the platform is built to do just that.
Yeah, it's so robust. I would say that the area of chaplain would be so key. I know that in our diocese, we have both a full-time chaplain and part-time chaplains at some of the schools. And one of the things is that, they're asking each other, okay, you get to do this full-time. How can I do something part-time that would make a difference?
Right.
And it just is, again, a way of information sharing that is just so critical.
Yeah.
And
well, if you want to start, if you've done some of that work and want to be part of a sub community for the chaplains, that would be glorious.
Yeah, I may know enough to be dangerous. That's part of the problem. But no, this is, I think, such a I don't know, there's just a lot of potential here to grow this. That's one of the reasons why when you and I were talking about the online community, I really wanted to do a show about it very quickly, because I really think that this can become a platform for a lot of growth for teachers, for educators. And I hope that administrators will help their teachers to get onto the platform. And that takes me to my next point, and that is, how do you join up? What do you do?
Right. So the basic thing is you go to makingeveryclasscatholic.com and you click the Join Today button, and it'll take you to a page where you can choose a monthly or an annual membership. If you join for a whole year, you save 2 months worth of membership dues. we also there's a few things to talk about there. So I mean that's straightforward. You go to join today, you click the thing, you pay through Stripe online, and you get set up in the community. But there's a few things that are worth considering when you said administrators helping their teachers do it. One of the things that we worked out, we had a founding members phase in November, and we have just over 60 people signed up, and those are the people you're encountering when you're in there. And the founding members helped me think through a problem which I hadn't figured out yet, which is how to do group rates. I did not want to sign up a whole school with 50 or 80 people because it could be an easy cash grab for me. But my research on this indicated that if you want to have a robust community, people need to have skin in the game.
Absolutely.
And if an employer with 80 people buys it for all 80 of them and 70 of them could care less, they're not going to participate in a meaningful way. And when the membership comes up in a year, the administrator is going to look and say, are we getting our money's worth out of this or not? If we need to save some money, this is an easy thing to cut. I want to build something a little more meaningful than that. And so what I wanted was groups of people who are committed to this work. And so what we had several schools do is we had a principal say, I've got 3 people, I've got 5 people, I've got, in one case, 13 people who are committed to this, who are going to be leaders in this area in my institution. We're going to sign up for a group, and you just send me an email, and we'll get you all the group pricing. But basically, it gets dramatically cheaper by the time you're at your 3rd member of that group. And so you can join as a group and save quite a bit of money, but still have that commitment and that buy-in that we want for a robust kind of community. So it was a way of kind of getting the best of both worlds there, allowing groups to join, but without watering down the commitment of the membership to the project that we're pursuing together. So that's one thing I wanted to share is the group rates. The other thing I want to share is schools have professional development budgets for things like this, and that's great. But not everyone has access to those. And I've committed from the start that no one who wants to be an active participant here is going to be turned down because they can't afford the monthly rate. So if you go and look at the prices and you say, even the monthly rate is a little bit of a stretch for me. If you click a button, it's going to ask you, have you asked your employer for PD funds? And if you haven't, we request that before you ask for financial aid, you check with your employer about PD funds. But if you have asked, or if you don't have an employer who has PD funds, then you can click through to the next page, which will say, you tell us what's sustainable for you. And you can choose very modest rates that you can make work in your circumstances. And we'll, on the honesty policy, we're gonna have you in the community at whatever rate you tell us you can afford.
Oh, that's great, because I think there are some people who might look at the pricing and go, that's, I know everybody's in Catholic education because of the big bucks.
Right.
Yeah. But I agree wholeheartedly with the fact that you've got to have some ownership in order to really take responsibility to be a part of a community.
Everything I read said if you fill up a membership artificially with people who don't have ownership, you kill it before it starts.
Yeah. I remember as I was doing some research in that area years ago, coming across the scripture where David, when he was king, said, I will build no structure that costs me nothing.
Okay.
In other words, I've got to have skin in the game too.
Right. If my gym membership is $7 a month, I don't go.
Yeah.
If I pay 80 or 90 bucks a month, I'm going to show up. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's scalable, like you said, which is beautiful for those that are on a tight budget or, maybe a smaller school where they're not getting those resources anywhere else, but they really want it.
Right.
And that's the thing that I love about this. I remember my first time as a high school president at a Duke and Altum School Summit. And this was early on before it was a membership organization. And I went up to Andy Tulicki from St. James Academy, and I go, where do I sign up for this? this is amazing. This is just what our school needs, is this kind of content and this kind of camaraderie and everything. And he said, well, we're just a group of schools, you know? And I said, well, really pray about becoming a membership community, because this is amazing. And of course, Duke Multum Schools has since grown exponentially. Right. I see the same thing here, that there might be a teacher in a small rural Catholic school that has a heart to really penetrate his or her curriculum, and they aren't at that point yet, but here is a place they can go.
Right. Right. And we don't want any of those people to not be able to join because of finances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they might actually be the grassroots that will build something throughout the whole school.
Well, yes. Yeah. And from my point of view, really help my community.
Yeah.
Those are the people I want in there, supporting everyone else and providing content and asking good questions and all that kind of stuff. Right. So,
yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I am so glad, Brett, that we were together again, and this is just fantastic to talk about this new online community. And again, for people that are interested, it is makingeveryclasscatholic.com, correct?
That's right. Yes.
And moving on from there.
Right. Father, can I make two rather bold requests?
Absolutely.
So the first request is the first time I've ever asked this, but I need to get better at asking. People have said to me, look, if you're providing financial assistance, right, if you're, you should ask if there's anyone out there who wants to sponsor a teacher.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Because right now, it's basically what it means is if someone comes in for whatever price, it means I need that many more people for me to become sustainable.
Right.
And I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that. But if you're out there and you say, this is a great idea, I want to support the teachers who are asking for financial aid, and you can be confident that, you know, if you're willing to go with me on the honesty policy, you can be confident that they have asked their employer for professional development funds and they don't have that available, but they're willing to stick their necks out and ask. And that's some skin in the game too. If you want to support those people, I would love to hear from you. I would love to be able to partner to help people who don't have the means themselves to join. So that's the first ask.
Okay. And how would they get a hold of you?
Oh, great. Well, you can just email brett@makingeveryclasscatholic.com.
Okay.
That's the easiest way. Or if you go to the website, you can fill in a contact form, would be another way. So yeah, if anyone wants to sponsor a teacher, that's great. And the second request is pray for us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I am learning hard lessons as what I almost want to use scare quotes when I say it, but as a small businessman, I have to buy things that sometimes don't work out, and you know, there's been hiccups and headaches and technological glitches and all kinds of things that keep you up at night when you're working hard to get something off the ground. My friend who was a small businessman for years just laughed at me and he said, "Oh, we all go through this, you know, every single thing, you know, everything you're talking about is what people go through." If I ever write a chapter for business teachers in Catholic schools, this experience will be very informative because I'm learning a lot about how you set priorities and how you make decisions on limited resources and how you recover from mistakes and how, you know, like all those kinds of things. Anyways, pray for me that it works, because it's taking a lot of time and energy. I think it's worth it. But it's good to have everyone on your team praying and cheering you on. So.
Oh, absolutely. And what a great privilege for all of us to pray for one another, and to pray for this endeavor is also to pray for our teachers, that they truly can make a difference. I really believe Catholic education is culture changing and life changing. Absolutely. So we see it every day. I'm coming to St. Michael the Archangel in Kansas City in February, where you were, Father, and the stories I'm seeing out of there on social media are just inspiring. That's right. Go Guardians. You can say that when you get there, and that'll automatically make you a part of the team. Awesome. So wonderful. Dr. Brett Salkeld, thank you so much for being with us. And I just really just look forward to the ways in which God is going to continue to use making every class Catholic in the future. Now, for those of you who have subscribed to our podcast or are following us on social media, be sure to leave a comment to encourage us toward future programs. May Almighty God bless you.
We'd like to thank you for joining us on this episode of Follow to Lead, a production of the Duke and Altum Schools Collaborative. To learn more about finding your own path in your journey of faith, or for more information on what we discussed in today's episode, you are invited to follow us on social media and visit us on the web at diaschools.org. To provide a one-time donation or monthly pledge, please visit our website. Your gift will aid us in providing up-to-date information, additional resources, and other support on how to take Catholic education to a higher level. We look forward to helping you follow God's call to lead others to God right here on Follow to Lead.